What is India eating? Hello and welcome to Explain Like I'm 10, where we ask such small questions which have some big complicated answers. What is India eating? Karan, what is India eating? That is the topic today. And to discuss this amazing topic, I have a very special guest. Charmaine O'Brien joins us currently from Delhi.
Yes.
She's based in Australia. She's actually a food historian and a journalist and a researcher and an author. She has written books like The Penguin Food Guide to India, which has won many awards. And her latest book that she has written, which I thought was very interesting, the title itself is called Eating the Present, Tasting the Future, Exploring India Through Her Changing Food. And her here is, of course, India. Not Charmaine. Charmaine is the author of the book, and
Mhm.
it's basically a part memoir and a part documentation of India's changing food habits, and also a deep dive into what sort of intense diversity we have in our food. Welcome, Charmaine. Thank you so much for doing this with us.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah. So your book released 2 days ago. I must remind the listeners. Your like, how has the reception been so far? Like, have you been
Oh,
getting good reception?
yeah, I mean, we did a little bit of a preview a couple of nearly 2 weeks ago, so got a good reception. I haven't had any. I haven't had a lot of feedback but people that I've spoken to, mainly journos who got pre copies of the books and things. I've had really positive feedback. People are, being very positive and generous with their feedback.
Very nice.
So I I think that one of the things that people are really, um, I think, quite amazed, not amazed, but that they like my perspective. They like the fact that I can give a different perspective that comes from me being an outsider,
Yeah.
and that I'm not here all the time.
Yeah.
So and also I've always been really curious about the everyday in India. I mean, that to
Hmm.
me is the most fascinating, apart from India's long history as well. But that's really
Yes.
fascinating. And I notice those things because if you're here all the time, you're immersed in them and you don't notice what you're immersed in.
Yeah.
So that I can give that perspective. I think the other thing I've brought to this book is I do have a broad education understanding of food history and the kind of general trends that happen with food when other things happen. And I wanted to put India into that bigger framework,
Hmm.
not just necessarily look and sort of see India as this separate thing. The trends that are happening fit into a bigger framework of what happens with food, how food trends come about, how they evolve. And there's historic precedents for what's happening in India at the
Yeah.
moment, albeit in somewhat different ways. But it's kind of, if you look at the process, the same sort of things are happening.
Right. And I understand, like, so in the life cycle of a nation, basically, like, I'll talk about that as well, because I think you have a chapter especially on food delivery apps, and I have
Yeah,
much to say
you
about
do.
that.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I have to introduce my colleague Karan, who is our union leader of spectators, who had no idea what the topic was and who you are. So Karan, so the topic today is, what is India eating? Any first reactions? You're a foodie, right?
Yeah, I like to consider myself so. Like I said, I'm not. I foodie in the sense I like to eat.
Yes, exactly.
My knowledge and understanding of food from a mechanical point of view is very limited. Let's just say that I can fix a mean mutton curry, but that's about it. That's the extent of my abilities.
So you don't cook regularly.
Not regularly. In fact, I must have started a little before the lockdown, and in the lockdown, basically, that was all the encouragement I needed. I was also kind of sitting at home doing nothing, and yeah, and with my wife working, kind of juggling everything, so I had to sort of
Hmm.
go into the
Pitch
kitchen and sort
in.
of yeah, kind of just sort of. And I did it out of my own kind of. I had some interest, and I was always thinking to myself, maybe this would be a great time to kind of start now. If not now,
Hmm.
then when, sort of a thing. And yeah, and I would. honestly, I just kind of looked at YouTube videos and copied whatever I saw without any kind of personal sort of input into it until much
Mm-hmm.
later when I started to get a hang of how the kind of the proportions of spices and all that works and how that eventually affects the taste, so to speak. So yeah, so since lockdown, so it's been about 3 years.
So like what we can do is Charmaine, so let us just explain. So now that you know Karan's sort of like level of interest in food, etc., let me tell mine as well,
Lack thereof.
So that you can basically judge how to answer what they are saying, etc. Also, I think we can give you a sort of an idea of where we come from region wise, so that maybe you
Yeah,
can
yeah,
also
that's
talk
good.
about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I come from Nagpur, which is central
Mhm.
India. Have you been? Do you know of the place, and have you explored
I
that
know
area?
about Nagpur, but I have to admit I've only been through there on the train. It's
Right.
a place I intend to go because it is apparently the centre of India. That is the
Yeah.
actual geographic centre of India, right? And I know that
Yes.
you grow
Yes.
lots of oranges. Um,
Yes.
and
Oranges. Yes.
there is there is a Nagpuri cuisine that I don't really know
Yeah.
very much about.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so I
And
know a little bit.
yeah, that's fine. And Karan, can you tell her where you're from and what is your roots?
Yeah, so I actually have roots both in Bombay and in Nagpur. So my mom's from Nagpur and my dad's from Bombay. I'm very well versed with both the cuisines in terms of Maharashtrian cuisine as well as, or rather, like Bombay food as well as Nagpur.
Mm,
I urge you, Charmaine, if you ever get a chance to try Nagpur cuisine, it's amazing. It's really spicy. It's sharp.
yes.
It's a lot of
Yeah.
things, and it's quite varied as well. And it picks up from a lot of different sort of
Mm,
geographically the
Yeah.
surrounding areas and all of that. So there's a lot of that happening as well.
So, just to add to what Karan said, right now my mission, one of my missions in life, Shamin, I must tell you, is to perfect two dishes. One is
yeah.
the Sauji mutton dish that we get in that part of India, which is extremely spicy, but it's like throat spice. I don't know how to explain it, but it's like
Yeah.
throat spice, and it's like very matured spice as well. It's a very
Mm,
different sort of experience when you have it. And the second thing is poha. So poha is this intense thing in Nagpur as well.
yes.
Yeah.
I can see you're also familiar with poha. I,
I
I'm
love I
I'm
love
pretty sure
Bombay.
you must have had it. Yeah.
Definitely. And also just thinking about where Nagpur is when I've been through like Madhya Pradesh in that kind of,
Yeah.
the southern part of the state and just stopped at a couple of, roadside dubbers. I've had some fantastic poha.
Yeah.
It was really good. In
Yeah.
fact, I've got pictures somewhere of the particular dubber. I don't know where it was, but it was in Madhya Pradesh. But it was in that. I've got some friends that live in Madhya Pradesh there. So,
Right. Right.
uh,
Must
yeah,
be.
no,
Was it
I'm
with all
guessing it must.
sorry, sorry,
Yeah.
Meghnad.
Go on. Go on,
Yeah,
Karan.
what's it
Karan.
with all the condiments, Charmaine? Like there's different ways of having poha, and if you go towards Nagpur, there's tari poha, which has like these 20 different types of condiments that you get along with the poha, and you can
mm,
kind of add in whatever you like. So there's like fried peanuts, there's chilies, there's this farsan slash chura mixture sort of a thing that you
Save,
have.
Ray. Save. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
but like actual chura, like like
Oh yeah. Yeah, of
really
course.
that one. Like so, there's this spicy sort of mixture that you get as well as a non-spicy one. Then there's the onions, and then there's this
Hmm.
tari. Tari basically is like curry, but it's really spicy. It's just, I, I mean, you can just tease it by saying it's just oil at this point, but it's
Yeah,
just
it is.
oily curry, which you kind of put on top of the poha along with some lime, some save, and then and you kind of elevate it to an, like the next level essentially.
Yeah.
It's
wow. Well,
amazing. Just was just wondering, was this what you had when
I
you were
must I
traveling?
must the one I had that I thought about didn't have that curry, that kind of strong,
Hmm.
but I'm off to Nagpur. I will go there.
Yeah.
It's definitely somewhere I have always intended to go to.
Right.
Um,
But Bombay is one place that you have spent a lot of time, right? Like exploring
I-
the food around there.
Bombay, I think Bombay is an amazing city.
Yeah.
Um, I spend most of my time in Delhi because this is kind of where all my friends are, my partners
Hmm.
my partners here.
Right.
So But if I wasn't connected to Delhi, I think I'd be a Bombayite. I think it's a great city, and in fact, I'm going there. I'm going there a couple of times. I'm going there for my book launch. Karan, I'll send you an invitation. Yeah, I want to do I actually think it's a really cool city, really cool, and it's got some really great food stuff happening. So I'm going to be investigating that again when I go there. So yeah, great city. I love Delhi too. Don't get me wrong, I really love Delhi, but
no, you're allowed to say that you love Delhi because I live in Delhi, and I love this city as well.
I love Delhi. I think it's an incredibly interesting city, but it's a bit hard to get to know, it's not I think Mumbai is a bit easier, but Mumbai's got a much higher gloss level on it as well in some, some aspects. There's a lot of glossy stuff happening there.
Absolutely.
Great cities in different aspects.
So, so Charmaine, you have spent, I think, first time you came to India was in 1995, if I'm not wrong. And you have been now in and out of India, I'm guessing, for 2 decades.
More than 2 decades, yes.
More than 2 decades now. So, like, I just wanted to know from your sort of perspective, what has changed? Like, so first time you came here versus now. What did you see, like, change within you? Of course your perspectives must have changed as well.
So the big change is when I first came here, I mean, India had only been a few years into liberalization, and it was still very like very sort of still had that kind of socialist vibe, and it was kind of I think it was a more frugal, like people were more frugal. There wasn't a lot of I mean, of course there were consumer goods, but they weren't around like they are now. Like it's you've had a whole, so it's that's really emerged is this much bigger kind of consumer driven sector of society, which I suppose has been a growing middle class, matched with growing prosperity, acknowledging that prosperity hasn't necessarily changed for everybody, but there's been a big economic, I mean, change in food is driven by economic change in most cases, because if people have more money to spare, they'll take more chances with trying new foods. Yeah, they can afford to take a risk. So that kind of general sort of economic prosperity that's turned India into very much a consumer society, as opposed to what I would just say was a more frugal society in general, and so what's come in with that is what I call a globalized food style. So India's still got all its diverse cuisines, different regional cuisines, sub-regions, community cuisines. That's not going away, but there's this global food style that's come in, which is to do also with technology. And what I mean by that is that I describe it as places where you could be anywhere. So, you can go into cafes in Delhi or Mumbai or Bangalore or Hyderabad and the menu and the ambience are such that I could be in Sydney. It's got all the kind of hallmarks of all, like the coffee things happening and the banana bread's there and the Nutella's there and the Oreos and the quinoa salad and the Buddha bowls and all that stuff's there, sometimes with no kind of indication of anything Indian on the menu, except maybe the coffee. He's making a big, after kind of ignoring Indian coffee and letting it go off and be made into kind of, instant coffee. Everybody's now onto the different Indian coffee. But otherwise, some places there's nothing to indicate you're in India. But some places also have incorporated Indian ingredients, into the quinoa salad, into the Buddha bowl. So that to me, and then in the kind of, I suppose, grocery, more sort of buying groceries, is you've got all the wellness trends here now, like all those kind of global wellness trends, gluten-free, gluten-free's there. Dairy-free, suddenly vegetarian here is plant-based food, which I find hilarious. because
Yeah.
India is the most diverse vegetarian, plant-based food,
Yeah.
forever. So just all those trends, the superfood thing. I mean, there's a big section in the book on superfoods. So
Yeah.
all that's there. All the chocolate that's happening, that's a big glow. Chocolate's become this kind of artisan thing all around the world. You've got great chocolate happening. But I think so. Just going back to when I first arrived and the first few times I was here, anybody that was eating, like, say, international foods, imported foods, was in that very elite kind of section of society. And
Yep.
and then there were Indian versions, like, of chocolate, for example, but it really wasn't very good. So
Hmm.
the kind of Indian versions of those things were not great. So that's
Hmm.
changed now because all those kind of international foods are everywhere. But
Right.
what's changed is that India is producing all these things. You're making great cheese. You're making cold cuts. Any kind of, so any making all the gluten free, the dairy free, all that sort of. So it's all happening here. Chocolate. You're making great chocolate.
Hmm.
Interesting chocolate that really speaks to the terroir here, not trying to replicate, other chocolate. Um,
Hmm.
I mean, there is some of that, but got all these artists and chocolate makers. Your wine industry's growing, so
Yeah.
though all those things are happening. You're not just getting like international or Western style food in kind of fancy 5-star hotels. It's
Hmm.
more, it's more sort of spread out. Young people are sitting in,
I think
cafe.
I think one
Sorry.
one 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 thing that you said, which I think propped up Karan's ears also, is the coffee part, which you just mentioned, right? Which
Mm.
is like, because both of us are big coffee nerds, and we
Yeah.
kind of nerd out about it whenever I'm in office as well.
Mm.
And like right now, only like when I was in Bombay, I got this KC Roasters Orchardale Estate coffee. So there is like this Orchardale Estate, which actually is serving many brands now, which are these different coffee brands like KC and Blue Tokai and everything. And I'm actually quite intrigued by how different each of these blends now taste according to
Mm.
estates. And current I think is also like trying out new sort of coffee flavors, but they're all indigenous, right? So it's not like we are getting like coffee from Turkey and like whatever, but it's all like very interesting and indigenous. And I
Yeah.
feel like that's one thing that has just recently happened to me in my life.
Mm.
I think over the past few years, which I think is also pointing towards what you're saying.
But a lot of those coffee estates, like I went to Araku a couple of years ago,
Hmm.
those coffee estates have been there for a long time.
Yeah.
As I was
Yeah,
saying, it's just
exactly.
nobody took any notice of them. And actually,
Yeah,
it was the French. The French were buying the coffee beans from Araku and actually marketing in France as Araku coffee.
Yeah.
Nobody here was interested in necessarily doing that. So that's one thing where you already had it, and it's also like the chocolate. You're already growing a lot of cocoa,
Yeah.
hmm.
cacao, however you want to say it. But now
Yeah,
you're using it. You're not sending it off or turning it into Cadbury. You're using it here.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. So that's very interesting to me, because I was also thinking like current, so like from childhood to now, I think that would be a good way to also like give Charmaine an idea as well. Like the amount of cuisines that I have been exposed to after I came to Delhi, especially, is mind blowing. Like, just to give
mm,
you an example, so I the first time I came here, I had this thing called shawarma, uh, and it blew my mind. And everyone who was coming from Nagpur or whatever, I would feed it to them, and they would be like, "Oh my god, what is this shawarma?" Shawarma has been there for centuries in Delhi, of course, but
mm.
coming from Nagpur to Delhi and then discovering this new food item. Same with momos, I would say. Momos have now like gone from the northeast to Delhi to now Nagpur as well, where there are like, it's an explosion of momo shops everywhere across India.
Oh,
But I've
definitely with
seen
the
that
momo.
happen.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm. I can
So
remember when you
I
had to go to Lunch Nugget to get momos, and now yeah,
oh
you're right, they're everywhere.
yeah. And but that's the thing. I've seen this happen. Like, so within India as well. I think cuisines are being shared from city to city. Like biryani, for example. Um, biryani exploded. Like Hyderabadi biryani was one. Then there was Kolkata biryani. There was Lucknow biryani. So many types of biryani. Now all the biryanis are available everywhere. It's like different kinds of biryanis you can have everywhere. So like in your experience, have you also seen this like internal transfer of knowledge or popularization as well?
Oh, definitely. There's a whole chapter in the book about that, because the
Right.
first time this is what got me. So the first time I came to India, the thing that got me, I wasn't actually, when I came to India for the first time, I wasn't coming for the food, because
Oh.
I'd only eaten Indian food in Indian restaurants in Australia. And I didn't, they just have those standard menus.
Yeah.
And I didn't particularly like it. Like, it was really oily, it was full of chili, and everything kind of tasted the same. Even if you thought every dish, despite having a different name, often all just tasted the same. So when I came to India, I just thought, oh, well, Indians all eat curry. Indians are all the same, of course. I thought that. And so I wasn't coming for the food. I wasn't worried about the food. Like, I thought, oh, I'm sure I'll be able to eat okay. But I really wasn't. There was no, even though I'd done a professional cookery training, I ran a catering business. I was very interested in food. I've been very exposed to food. I did not come here thinking about food. So when I came and I discovered, just from traveling around, I was being a backpacker. I wasn't even being particularly adventurous.
Right.
And things like pulling into the railway station at Nagpur, and, there'd be different snacks being sold to what you get a couple of 100 kilometers down the track.
Absolutely.
And that really turned my head. I was like, wow. And then I was also, at that point, I was a budding food historian. So I was looking for a subject, and suddenly it was like, India is going to be my subject. And there was a whole lot of other experiences that went into that. But the thing then, that when I made that decision and I came back and I started to, through connections, get to know Indians more and talk to people, when I'd say to some people that I wanted to write and learn about Indian food, people would say to me, why? What's interesting? Why would you do that? And they did. And they'd think their own food was great, but it wasn't, why would you go to the south? It's all idli and dosa. Why would you go to the, Punjab? It's all kind of heavy. Gujarati food's too sweet. So it was all those kind of stereotypes. And in my head, I just think, I can't believe you can't see what you've got. But that's the whole key, is they couldn't see it. And that's what's changed. That's one of the things that's changed. So how people, so you're absolutely right. Now there is an explosion of people researching, writing, deep diving into regional, sub-regional, community, family, individual ingredients, which is fantastic, because you could write a whole set of encyclopedias about food in India. And thick ones. So, but that did not exist when I first started coming here. And there was bits of it. I'm not saying nobody, but just by and large, there was nothing like it is now. And there was some regional food in restaurants, either in a few 5-star restaurants or just in these really kind of mum and pop places. But they were usually cooking for like if you had it like a Bengali community, like in Chitranjan Park in Delhi, you get Bengali stuff there, but it was really serving that community. Whereas now you kind of get the gastronomic tourists going to Chitranjan Park to have it, to get some Bengali food. So that's been a really major shift. So and in my book, what I'm saying is, what I see, go back to ask me what I'm seeing. One of the biggest shifts is food coming from inside the home to outside the home.
Okay.
Because when I first came to India, so you've got that ghar ke khana, so inside home food.
Ghar ka khana.
And then, so I'm probably saying, and then you've got, bahar ke khana, which is outside food.
Yeah.
I was so surprised, because in Australia at that time, it was all about restaurants. It was all about, eating out, and domestic food had kind of been, not looked down on, but, you want to go out. It was all about chefs and restaurants. So to come somewhere and find that actually it was inside food that was most valued, and that actually people would feel a bit sorry for you if you had to eat outside.
Yes.
or your parent, your grandmother would be horrified if if you ate outside, or your parents would do everything to stop you eating outside, right? So that was
Absolutely.
so interesting to me. And I realized there's a whole lot of other sort of things built into that,
Yeah.
but I just found that fascinating. So what I'm writing about in the book is that movement from food from inside the home to outside the home. And so some of the ways that's happened is technology.
Yeah.
And I write about how most meals in India are still made in the home, and they're mainly made by women. I'm not saying there's no men
Hmm.
cooking, but it's largely women, and it always has been. So women have been the sustainers of India's incredibly diverse food product. It's their labour that has maintained all those different regional cuisines. But they're in the home. And
Yeah.
I suppose a bit sequestered potentially.
Hmm.
That's another big change, that women seem to have a lot more freedom, to feel more socially free now to move around. And
Hmm.
so what happened was, when we first got the internet and people started blogging, Indian women went for it. Like, that was it's almost like an outlet they were just waiting for. And so
Hmm.
by doing that blogging and doing, it was all largely recipes and how I make this. And then, of course, you could do video. It was like
Yeah.
they could go inside each other's homes in other regions. And I think that's the start of this deep interest now in regional cuisines that really wasn't
Yeah.
there before.
And even
Travels and
even YouTube says this, that one of their biggest genres, especially in Indian content, is food, which is like
mm,
all these small houses like Kavita's
mm,
Kitchen and all these small. There is this. I'm obsessed with these channels, the village cooking channels,
mhm,
which I think is a very Indian thing. Which is like
mm.
they prepare like these giant amounts of food, and then
Yeah,
they
I've
feed
seen
it to like people, and then like entire villages that are being sustained based on a YouTube channel. Which there was a story I was reading on that, and it's a very Indian thing. I feel like I've never seen anything happen anywhere. But then there are trends like mukbang, right? Which is, I think, like a southeastern sort of content trend where people are just eating food, and you're looking at people
that.
eating food.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's that I don't, those things where people stuff themselves with food. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's true. But just to go back to that,
Yeah.
why it's so popular? Because, and this is a little bit to do with how India's developed and when it's come into what it's come into, is because you've had this sustained food culture where women have been in the home and working. You've had all this amazing diversity of food, right? That
Right.
maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, nobody would have been interested in watching people in a village cooking, right? But this has kind of
Hmm.
come in at a time where the world's talking about local, sustainable. It's like in Australia, people love watching cooking shows, but they're not cooking, right? So they'd rather
Right.
sit there and spend an hour watching MasterChef, but they don't cook. And I
Yeah.
think what you've got is you've still got all this cooking going on, and people love to watch it. But you've got it there, like it's there, and there's so much of it. And people have taken to technology. So people that have got like cooking at home have come into a world where it's really, you can film yourself. Anybody can film. Get an iPhone
Hmm.
or whatever, and you can capture all of that. That didn't exist a while ago either. So that's also a confluence of all these different things happening.
Yeah.
In as I think, particularly Western countries where people are cooking, really cooking less and less. They're more and more interested in seeing it. It fits in with what they like. I think what they like to imagine, or what they think they do, or something. And you guys have got it.
Huh.
And everybody's filming themselves.
But
Like the
you're
guy.
saying, it's different in India, that more people want to cook here rather than just see food, or is it like the
Um,
same trend you're seeing?
I'm not so much saying people want to cook. It's just that you've got a lot of people that still do
Sure.
cook, if that makes
Sure.
sense.
Sure.
I
I
don't.
just wanted to interrupt. I just wanted to interrupt, and I wanted to actually linger on that one point which you mentioned, this ghar ka khana, bahar ka khana thing. Karan, do you feel guilty when you have bahar ka khana?
That depends. Do I still have my home food in my tiffin, or am I not carrying it with me? Because if I'm not, then it's guilt free. If I'm carrying my home cooked food with me in my tiffin and I don't eat it, then yeah, there's hell to pay. I think.
No, but like bachpan se, like I mean, since childhood, I must say that in me at least, my parents have beaten this thing into my head that ghar ka khana is the best khana, and you should eat as much ghar ka khana. You shouldn't eat outside. Like, okay, special occasions you can eat outside, whatever. So basically, whenever we went out to eat, it was always a special occasion, like a birthday
Mhm,
or like a
mhm,
holiday or something of that sort.
mhm,
At least in my family. Now it's funny how that carried forward even now, because like every time in a given week, if we order too much, I start feeling very guilty that we haven't eaten
mhm.
at home enough, I haven't cooked enough, or my partner hasn't cooked enough, or we haven't eaten at home enough, because that is more nutritious, and we can't just have that other outside food all the time. It is it like a unique Indian thing that I'm just describing right now?
Oh, that I think that is in terms of having those, even those words around the different sort of food. I think
Yeah,
that's very uniquely Indian. That's when I came here, I was just like amazed at this. I'd never, it was quite a distinct thing. Um, yeah, I think it's probably more Indian than it might be elsewhere. I mean, I live in a country with a really industrialized food system. So
right.
there's probably, more acceptance or encouragement to, to eat all meals out, or I'm not saying everybody does that. But, this kind of, this idea that it is better to eat at home. Look, I don't disagree with that. I actually think if you're concerned about your food and its relationship to your health, or hopefully to a wider concept of health, then I think you probably do need to eat most of your meals at
Hmm.
home, that you cook
Yeah.
cooked, and you know what's in them, and you're not adding lots of fat and salt and stuff.
Yeah.
And probably not wasting as much. I mean, often when you
Hmm.
go out, you might overorder, and you're either wasting it in your body by eating it all because you feel like you have to because you paid for it, or you're
Yeah.
not eating it. It's all just goes in the bin. So I actually personally, I agree with that. I love eating out, but if I eat out too much, I really feel like I just need to go home and have a really good salad and something quite simple.
Yeah.
Um, so
That's
yeah,
I really like how you brought that out in your book as well. Like, I mean, you were just saying ghar ka khana, bahar ka khana. I didn't actually think that this was a like an Indian thing, but now I realize how important that is, as on a psychological level, for an entire population to think this way, and how that actually sustains the indigenous culture. And of course, the thing you said about how women are the ones who are essentially doing this
mm,
primarily at a household level, that is
mhm.
also super interesting. But I have to take a quick break here. After we come back, I want to
Mm.
ask you a little bit more about how software eats India, is what your
Yeah,
chapter
okay.
is called. Like software eats it. I saw that chapter name and I was like, yeah, but it is true. After this break, we will come back and we will talk to Charmaine about this. And Karan will have his own questions. Uh,
Mm.
if you are watching this show on the YouTube feed, we have two other shows happening. One is Page 10, which is our current affairs podcast hosted by Abbas Momin. Please do check that out. And we have another show called How to Citizen, where we sit down and read the 7th grade civics book with famous people. And please do check that out as well. And of course, this is explained like at 10. Please like, share, subscribe, do the things. I will see you after this break.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcasts Network. On Cyrus Says, Cyrus was joined by classic musician Prince Ramavarma. They spoke about his musical journey, his teachers, the story behind an erotic French song, and being born and raised in a royal family. On Anish Thing, Anish hosted Avinash M., founder of FTS Fitness. They spoke about body recomposition, diet styles, and the fundamentals of body transformation. On All Things Policy, Anushka Saxena discusses the geopolitics of China-Taiwan relations with Ambassador Vijay Gokhale. And on The Habit Coach, Ashton shares some tips to curtail mindless munching at the airport. Once again, don't forget to visit our merch store on ivmpodcasts.com. We have some exciting stuff for you. Follow us on social media. We are IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. If you like our shows, spread the word, tell your friends, and don't forget to rate and review them wherever you're listening to them. You'll also find all our shows on youtube.com/IVM Podcasts. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors this week. Cash-Free Payments and HDFC Mutual Fund, thank you for making this possible.
Hello and welcome back to Explain Like I'm 10, where we are asking a very important question. What is India eating right now, yesterday, and in the future? All of the things matter. And to answer this question, we have Charmaine O'Brien with us. Charmaine, let's get into software. I want to know about the food delivery app ecosystem. What is happening? What are your observations, and how it's most importantly shaping our food habits now? Because like before the break, we spoke about how ghar ka khana, bahar ka khana, and now because of food delivery apps, it's just like bahar ka khana right here. It will come in like 30 minutes, so we might as well do it.
Exactly. That is fascinating. Suddenly there's this acceptance of this food that you don't even know who cooked it, right? Coming into the home. That's been fascinating for me. Well, this is a whole. So just I've got particular opinions about this. I've tried to put a balanced view in the book. I've got a psychology education, and I've also been trained in systems thinking. So this is what I see, or what I sort of notice with. Okay, there's a bit of a history about food apps.
Sure.
And of course,
Go on.
India's always delivered food. I mean, I write in the book about, probably 20 years ago, ordering Narula's hot chocolate fudge sundaes, and they arrived on the doorstep. I mean, in Australia, then you'd maybe get a pizza delivered. So this was fascinating. Anyway, what I've seen with the food apps is they have undertaken a massive public behaviour change campaign. They have trained people to use apps to get food. That's where they've spent a lot of their money, because it's a new, food delivery is not new, but using an app to get it was a new thing. And so that there was all, one of the ways they did that was by offering discounts, right?
Right.
And it's almost like when you go on the app and you open your food delivery and you look for discounts, when you get one, it's like you get a bit of a dopamine hit as well. So that contributes to, getting you kind of, used to it or a little bit. So you kind of go back to it, and then the discounts keep you going back because in order for those kind of food delivery companies to make a profit at some point, they're going to have to really dominate the market.
Yeah.
And because they're based on scalability, they also need to get an enormous number of users for that to happen.
Correct.
So you've got to so what they were doing though is they just kept it. So then they had to keep offering discounts, because that's what people have been trained to expect from the apps. Now, I think COVID changed that a bit, because people were getting all sorts of food. They were getting high-end restaurant food through the food delivery apps. So that's what I see happening. Now, you could say that was a manipulative, or you could say it was just a business practice. Either of those things, both those things are possibly true. But that's what I saw, was this this kind of public behavior change campaign, i.e. changing you to make the behavior of, I'm hungry, I need something to eat, on your app. That's right. The behavior, right? And then, of course, whatever brand app you are, you want that person to come to your app, because once you kind of use one app like that, you tend to stick to it. However, if you're not getting a good enough discount, you might go to the other one. Yeah. So that I saw that. And also just making comments like, basically kind of telling people that this was something they needed. Now, I don't think anybody needs food delivery, right? I'm not saying they don't
Right.
want it, but I don't think they necessarily need it. It's like in countries like Australia over the years, we've been trained to believe that by, not in such a big way, that we've got more important things to do than cook, that cooking's actually something that you can put aside. And so, this stuff goes on everywhere. But the thing with the food delivery apps is the amount of money, the investor money that came in that allowed them to undertake something on a scale that normally only governments can do. Like your Swachh Bharat, right? That's a public behaviour change campaign.
Yeah.
Normally governments do that sort of thing. So I just found that really fascinating to watch. And then systemically, all that money that's coming in to fund those food apps, it's coming in largely from international investors, right?
Right.
Interested in making a profit. And there's nothing wrong, it's
Sure.
fine. They don't really care about what Indians are eating, right? It's not
Yeah.
a concern. And ultimately, when push comes to shove and they want their profits, other things will be cut. Like, look at what tech companies are doing at the moment. They're what are they doing? Getting rid of people because their profits are diminishing. I mean,
Sure.
what's new and innovative about getting rid of people? When your profits go down. So I just think systemically, there's a lot of stuff going on above the food, what's the actual food app that's got nothing to do with people that are living in India.
That's very interesting because so I just wanted to quickly sort of ask Karan also. Karan, how long have you been using Zomato? Do you remember?
I mean, since it probably launched.
So that was, I think, like 20. I remember like 2014, 2013, 2014.
2012, 13, 14, around that time. Yeah.
It's been a while.
It's been a while, but I remember. So like I asked this question because I remember like the transformation of Zomato over the years, right? Like as a food delivery app. I remember like Zomato being just this one directory which you could go to find nearby restaurants, and they would have like photographs of menus on them, right? And you could actually see the pick like the menus, and then you had to physically call them. And then they would essentially deliver, right? That actually transformed into like now you just press a button in like 30 seconds, you're just ordering whatever you wanted, it comes. It was like very fast. That happened like super fast because I felt like the whole calling process was a big barrier for me to order from outside, which is because you had to explain the address, you had to also explain what you want, and then they would like mess it up, and then it was very annoying. So it's like, why are we doing this? Let's just cook at home. That was the process. But now Zomato has made it so easy to essentially order food that I don't have to go through that process again. And what you said, Charmaine, was very important, where if I'm hungry in the evening, I immediately think about ordering something on Zomato. I don't think like I'll go in the kitchen and fix myself up something very quickly, like a bread sandwich, whatever. I have tons of things here. I can make probably a better meal than maybe a Zomato. But there is a behavior change there.
And you say about it being easy to order. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But the question, my question is what should food be easy to get? Should we be making a bit more effort to get our meals? And in fact, if you got up and went into the kitchen and made yourself something, like a salad, would it take you any more time than sitting around waiting for the delivery to arrive?
Not really. I think it'll be the equal amount of time.
Yeah, but still, it's not like the delivery is not necessarily any quicker. It's just that you didn't have to make any effort. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. It's just, I always question this kind of diminishing of actually spending any time engaging with what you eat, particularly when we're talking about all this well-being and healthism around food. But then we're going off and we're ordering food that we have absolutely no involvement in preparing or even seeing where it's prepared now. Because as you say, that's fascinating that people now just are happy to order this food in, that they have no idea what the what sort of kitchen it's in. I'm not suggesting that the kitchens are anything other than, hygienic, suitable, professional kitchens. But, we've got that whole cloud kitchen thing happening with a lot of this food where you don't even see it. You can't even go in and see what's happening. And personally, I think I'm not sure that divorcing ourselves from food in that way. Yes, it's easy. Yes, you can get discounts. Yes, you can get any commercial food that you want. But is that a good thing? And should we have been sort of supported to do that?
Sure.
They're my questions. I absolutely.
Karan, what do you think? Like, do you agree with this philosophy, or what do you
Yeah,
think?
I mean, very honestly, I'm kind of surprised to hear this point of view because I've never really thought of it from that POV. I've always thought of people or rather I've always thought of the growing sort of surge in popularity of of apps like Zomato and Swiggy was more down to the sort of growing middle class, which is also aspirational, and then that mentality of, you know what, if I can get this right now delivered to my house, why not? I have the means to kind of eat it
Mm,
or consume it. I've always thought of it from that point of view. I've never thought of it as it being a problem that less people are eating home cooked food, because I feel that people have always eaten home cooked food in India, especially. If you are a working professional, you are going to be carrying your food with you to work.
mm,
In the rare sort of cases where you're not carrying it, like maybe you'd probably order in, and then if you're ordering in, it becomes like a whole community thing because you can find like-minded people and you can kind of just get a nice meal and have like a nice feast at work. But yeah, I've it's really interesting how, there are some points of view where it's viewed as kind of being, I don't want to say problematic, but it's just like a sort of a negative for why it exists.
But
um
there are two things I wanted to point out here, Karan. I feel like are important. One is this obsession with productivity now. I think that also plays a role in this. Like, for example, Charmaine, what you said about how, will it take me the equal amount of time to, let's say, prepare a salad, or like wait for the delivery guy? Like, both of the things, right? Sure, I can make a salad faster, and then the delivery guy might come later. But my thinking there is, oh, now I have half an hour to do something productive while someone is preparing food for me and getting it for me, and I just have to eat it quickly and then go back to my job. I think that is one of the things that plays in my head, where, like, let's say I have a recording at like 2, right, and I finish with a meeting at 1, and then I'm like, oh, but then I have to prepare for the 2 o'clock thing. So then meanwhile, I will just quickly order while the food is coming. I will quickly eat it, prepare, and then go back to work. I think that plays one role. But another thing, I think, Charmaine, I don't know if you observe this, but is stress. Like, stress eating is a thing. Do you think like that also plays a role in changing food habits and also the usage of these apps?
Did you say stress?
Stress, yeah, stress. Like, I think I feel like generally people around me are more stressed, especially since the
Yeah.
pandemic. And does that also affect people when they say that, oh, they become very lethargic and don't want to go in the kitchen and put in that effort? And sometimes it feels like you're rewarding yourself at the end of the day because you had such a shitty day, such a stressful day. Does that make sense?
Oh, definitely. So just one thing, Karan, I think what you were saying about, growing middle class, people like to do it because they can do it and they can afford it. I think that's true. That's there. What I'm talking about is, I don't think it's what people are thinking about. That's what I see.
Right.
Right.
So I think that's all. Look, all the things we're talking about, I think it's got good points and it's got potentially some, not so good points. But just the stress thing, yeah, that's really interesting because people, when they're stressed, people often think all they want to do is flop on the couch and watch, whatever, binge watch something, or just tune out. We all do it. But actually, we're kind of being trained to that. It's like maybe making a bit of effort to, just chop some. I find chopping things actually quite relaxing. So,
Yeah.
and that's not true for everybody. I mean, I'm a confident cook, so I
Yeah.
find cooking really enjoyable. In fact, what I do when I cook is I put on a podcast. So I love cooking because I listen to podcasts
Yeah.
all day, cook all day.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that giving yourself a treat. And again, it's that reward thing where you get on there and you go through and you find what is a good discount or is a bit different maybe to what you normally have, and then you just order it, and it arrives. So if you're feeling a bit stressed or tired, sure, I think it definitely is attractive from that perspective. I don't think it's going away. However, globally, they think that it's kind of peaked, the food delivery stuff. Now, I don't know if that applies to India, because I've been listening to, I know in Australia we've had a couple of the big players pull out, and we also had one of those fast delivery companies collapse in the last week. So
one of them collapsed in India as well. One of them collapsed in India as well. I mean, Blinkit here in Delhi, so it's not been working very well because they miscalculated the amount of essentially payment that they're giving the delivery guys to give it to us in 10 minutes or something. But go on.
Exactly.
I think it's the same reason.
It's the same reason. It was costing the company something like $40 to deliver one delivery, so it was an absolutely unsustainable model. Once they can get drones, then that sort of things, or driverless vehicles or whatever, I mean, that's a bit off into the future, but that's when those things will come back into play, not while they've got to pay humans to do it. I don't think it's because using all these apps, ultimately it's kind of like labor control. So it's like in the cloud kitchens, and they're already doing it. You're going to get robots, right? They'll get more and more robots in there producing food. It's happening. It's going to happen. And so you can reduce people, right? So then you reduce your labor costs there, and eventually they'll potentially get drones or driverless vehicles or whatever. And once they can eliminate as many people as possible, then that's when you can still charge people the same. You just have less people in there. So look, I do have a bit of a dystopian view of it, but that doesn't mean that's true and it's going to happen. And as I said, I acknowledge that people value the service, they like it, it helps a lot of people out. As I said, it's been great for women, like women doing small kind of home-style food businesses through that. Food delivery saved a lot of restaurants during COVID. But I don't have an app.
You don't have an app. You personally don't have an app. Interesting.
I don't actually use it. It's not not my thing. The other thing
that's actually quite an interesting point, because I feel that these food delivery apps have empowered quite a small, albeit a small section, but a certain section of society that feel that, hey, I can cook and I think I love to feed people, but maybe because I don't have the wherewithal to set up like a whole kitchen, I can just do it from my home, as long as the society, the building society and all that don't have a problem with you running it. So I a couple of my friends mums have actually done this, that they are great cooks, of course, and they know that they have a certain cuisine that they're really good at, so they've just sort of set up a page on Zomato and a Swiggy, and sort of and that's it, and then business is on. So
it's great.
Obviously it's like a small kind of silver lining in all of this, but I feel it is quite empowering for all these sort of home chefs, so to speak.
Definitely. And look, the other aspect to that, I think that's quite distinct to India, actually, that those women setting up those. Didn't see it much in Australia, although food delivery hasn't been, it really peaked in COVID and it's really dropped down. We're not necessarily that big on it. Australians and a lot of, people mainly use it for like junk food. So you always see all these delivery riders, queued up out the front of Kentucky Fried Chicken or McDonald's or whatever. A lot of restaurants in Australia, I think, have stopped using it. So, but I also think it's just going to be part of the foodscape. I'd probably not necessarily going to be the dystopian monster that I kind of, I visualize. But let's see. I could be right, I could be wrong, it could be something in between. But as I keep saying, I totally acknowledge a lot of people find it really, really valuable, and they like using it, and etc.
I actually want to pull you to a little bit of a dystopian world, because that's what I do on this podcast. No, what I wanted to also ask you, maybe this question is, I think, also important, because a lot of people are now thinking about this two things. One is, of course, processed food. So there was this recently, last week only, there was this controversy where this person, this influencer, was talking about what all this Bonvita, this milk health health drink brand contains, right? And he said that something like 40% of it is sugar.
The Bonvita thing about the
Yeah,
sugar.
the Bonvita. Yeah, about the sugar thing. And essentially, the company sent him a legal notice, and he had to take down the thing. So it created a big sort of, not that big, but like, I mean, it was a news item that took like got some attention.
Oh, I saw it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was interesting because as a child I also used to drink these health drinks, quote unquote, right? Again, no knowledge of sugar, no knowledge of whatever, and even parents were sort of convinced through advertising that this is good for your kid. I worry about that, because now I see that advertising is all penetrative, which is like essentially because of social media, because of the internet, you can do much more targeted advertising than you used to. So one of my question was, are you seeing this sort of dangerous trend where processed food, which is actually harmful to you, is being consumed more and more in India? And also, it's a second question after that. First, this. Yeah.
I expect it is. If you ask me, have I seen it? I mean, I see it more in stores and things, so I presume that stores are stocking it because people are consuming it. I don't see my friends, consuming that, but I'm talking about, I've got friends, my friends are educated. However, I want to talk more about that processed and food trend thing around this. Yeah, I think definitely, because again, the biggest, particularly in kind of countries like Australia and America, biggest influence on food choice now is branding. So the way something, what you're talking about, the way something looks, which influencers got it, what are the graphics like, what are the what are the labels you put on it, what are the words you put on it, what are the words that you hide in very small print at the back, it's all, and then after that comes taste, and then I think it's convenience, and I think quality is like second last or something. So definitely. And of course, the bigger a company, the more money they've got to throw at branding and having something everywhere, and paying some influencer to be on there and say, look at this, and and I think that's particularly dangerous for children, because kids get very sucked into bright, shiny, moving things and fun, and if I haven't got kids, I don't know if you guys have, but once a kid gets in their mind that they want something, and if all their friends are having it, it's very, very hard to push back on that.
Absolutely.
So, and kids like sweet things. I mean, I like sweet things, but kids like sweet things. So, yeah, I think that will definitely happen. I think that also a lot of those things, those sort of foods, for some people in India, they're still novel. Like it's still a novelty to buy these sort of things and use them. But the other thing about those is a lot of them are pretty cheap as well.
Yeah.
Like Bonvita's not particularly expensive. It might have been in the past, but I think it's becoming more affordable. And you know what they do? They put it in those small packets, right? So that it becomes affordable. The fortune at the bottom of the pyramid thing. So I actually think that kind of food is going to be more problematic and in a certain kind of sector for India. Potentially people that, don't have a lot of money but still want to enjoy the novelty of new foods. They're attracted by the packaging. That could be problematic there. And I'll tell you why. So on the other side of that, and you asked me the second part of the question. So yes, I think definitely there's going to be more consumption of. That's
Actually, I'll add to that because you already mentioned it a little bit. My second part of the question was about sugar, like the consumption of sugar and how. So I was watching this documentary on how cornstarch sort of ruined America, and how everything, like fast food to everything, had cornstarch in it, which actually increased the level of diabetes and obesity in America, and I mean just sugar in general in the food. I also worry about that happening in India, because the interesting thing, you must have seen this, Charmaine and Karan, of course, the Apple store opening in BKC, right, which happened like 2 days ago. India got its first Apple store, um, you know, coming here. But I also remember, McDonald's coming to town, like or like a KFC coming to town, and like or like even like this Tim Hortons, which is a Canadian brand, which came to like Delhi recently. The lines that were there for days, again, it's such a aspirational thing, because but the point here is that it's the same cornstarch food that was there, which is coming now to India, and then everybody is like, oh my god, it's here, and we want to have it more. And that kind of worries me. Have you seen like this trend as well, like
Definitely.
health
Yeah, I
wise,
suppose
but in general?
yeah. And it comes back to Karen's point about, aspiration and, wanting to use apps. Yeah, people will want those. They haven't had them, so they're novel. And people, when people have got a bit more money to spend on food, they seek novelty, and novelty in food has status as well. So and also because they're all seeing it on these on their social media, on television. And, a lot of it's about America. And, a lot of people are still not very savvy about America. Like they see the shiny stuff on TV, and, people are having whatever, and you go into the supermarket and there's 400 different cereals, which are essentially the same thing. They've just got different packaging wrapped around them. So I think that's potentially going to be problematic, because you have got. Why is everybody interested in India externally at the moment? One of the main reasons is you've got a lot of people, and you've got people and they all want to get in here. And also, I think there's an awareness that perhaps there's a big section of the Indian society that's not necessarily, and I don't, in terms of I think what they're eating at home is probably fine. Like they cook really nice food at home, but they're not sophisticated in their understanding of kind of this novelty food. And they'll be a bit easily manipulated. However, I want to just counter that with the other manipulation that's going on at the other end of the market, and that is around all those superfood and wellness things. That is also a whole lot of manipulation. It's just labeling, it's more branding, and people are actually paying more for that. So it's not. I'm not saying that that if people are not necessarily as economically affluent, that they're kind of not as sophisticated in one way. But I also think people that are running out after all these kind of wellness and healthism stuff are also not necessarily as sophisticated as they think, because a lot of those products, they might be gluten-free, they might be dairy-free, but some of them have got a lot of other sort of sugars in them. Some of them have got highly processed. Like there's all these for example, gluten-free biscuits, cakes, all sorts of stuff that, just because they're gluten-free doesn't make them any healthier. And they've got all this stuff in them. I mean, they've done studies where some of these things have got more calories than the kind of the standard version of these sort of things. So I think that we all kind of get led and sucked in by things around food, which is why I go back to, I think the best thing to do is cook at home, from much as from scratch. Now, in saying that, of course, I like eating out and I eat other things. So I think it's problematic. I think it's a bit of a problem across the board that we're kind of getting bamboozled about. And then we get like celebrities, eat this, do this. And it's like, well, you've got all that money, you've got all those resources. Somebody's paid you probably to hold that up, and that's so pervasive and so influential. Obviously, they're called influencers.
But
so
yeah,
that's
so I mean, you're also worried about it. Is basically what you're saying?
me.
Yeah. Are you personally worried about this trend?
Look, I think it's there. I think it's going to potentially be problematic. And yeah, am I worried? Yeah, I suppose I am worried about it. I'm more that I think, oh, can't you see? I mean, for me, it's more like, and not so much I just think, can't you see? Like, can't you see what's going on there? Like, and what's also really going on? Like a lot of that gluten-free superfood, it's subliminated dieting, right? Because you're not allowed. Dieting's not cool anymore. So people, I know this because I'm a woman. I'm not saying men don't do it, but a lot of women eat that stuff because they think they're going to lose weight or it's going to help them keep weight off. People won't admit this sort of stuff, right? But I know from talking to friends that's really what's going on. Not always. There are people that are
As a man,
genuinely
agree, because I have guy friends who are only like, for example, maybe not dietary things, but I do have some friends who are only doing like intermittent fasting, but no exercising, thinking just the intermittent fasting is gonna make them lose weight. It goes both sides. It's not,
Yeah.
and that's what I mean. I keep telling everyone it's not just the diet. I mean, sure, diet is like maybe 70% of the whole
it's a
sort
large
of
part of it.
journey towards weight loss or even weight gain. But you
Mm.
need to exercise, you need to have some sort of fitness routine to kind of complement the diet as well. Quick question though, when you say like superfood and the whole thing, is this does this have to do with like the processed food, or like this new kind of trend of different seeds and kind of like
So
seeds and lentils and stuff?
Sabudana. Sabudana is a
Chia
superfood.
seeds, man, chia seeds for omega
sabudana,
3.
Chia seeds.
wow, I love sabudana khichdi. I'm going to go
Yeah.
and stuff
Same.
myself with it.
It's my
Um,
favorite.
Same.
Yeah, isn't it so delicious?
Yeah.
I didn't know sabudana. I knew makhana was a superfood, and I was
Makhana. Yes.
absolutely makhana, and I was so incensed because I saw this thing written up about it in an Indian, some sort of I don't know, on a blog or something, and it said that eating it helped battle fine lines and wrinkles, and I just thought, oh my God, that is taken from an American playbook. Indians don't get fine lines and wrinkles. I mean, Indians age, but you don't get like Westerners do, right? And I just thought, oh my God, someone lifted that from an American thing. Apart from the fact it's completely ridiculous that anything like that would prevent fine lines and wrinkles, but all that it's just like that just does my head in.
But any other superfoods that you have come across that we should know about? I'm interested.
In India?
Yeah.
Well, I find the whole I've got a whole story in there about millets that
Okay.
a number of years ago, I was just trying to cut this short. I'd taken some quinoa to a friend's place in Madhya Pradesh, and I was making it in the kitchen, and she came in and she said, "What's that?" And I told her, and she said, "Oh, we have that in our village," which is where she came from in in UP. She said, "But only poor people eat it." And I realised what she was talking about was millet, because I asked her, because it wasn't growing. I had quinoa, but she thought it was millet, because quinoa and some millet do look quite similar. And there was this whole, millet was something that, you were backward. You were, poor people ate it. And now it's a superfood. And I think, because I've traveled a lot, I've always been fascinated by millet here, because you make so many things out of it, but it was always in regional areas, right? It wasn't, and nobody really wasn't fashionable, and suddenly it's a superfood. And I think if millet's super, it's to do with its ability to grow anywhere. Like, it's a great food for environment, because if you look at the nutritional breakdown of millet and you compare it to wheat, they're kind of similar. Like, millet's got a bit more of something, wheat's got a bit more of something, right? We're not calling wheat a superfood.
Yeah.
And actually, if you grow wheat in the places where it's indigenous to, it will grow easily as well, right? So it's
Yeah.
just that wheat doesn't have that. So that sort of thing. And so what happens with those sort of things is you've had millets grown, right? People have been growing them, but they're usually in poorer communities. And now suddenly millets are being repackaged with a fancy label and the word, superfood. And so people pay more for them. So you start extracting them out of communities that have relied on them, who then get a bit more money for their millet, right? Which is great. But then they're not eating their millet because they can get more money for it. So they get a bit more money and they start buying more Maggi noodles or, the kind of things that they can now afford. So what happens with this wealthy people latching onto these foods is they often can diminish the food systems of others, which is what happened with quinoa. I don't know if you remember, the huge thing with quinoa, a decade ago. It actually disrupted the food systems in the areas where that came from.
Okay.
And then what happens is people start growing. So if you get this huge demand for millets, right? Millets are actually really hard to process.
Right.
They'll start industrializing them. It'll happen if you get this huge demand. So
Even I can give you one. I can
Mm.
give you one more example. There's this Kerala rice, which people say is a superfood, right? Which is basically unwashed rice. So unprocessed, unwashed rice, which
that purpley coloured one.
That's the one.
Yeah. It's
So
delicious.
but they started selling it as a superfood, and I'm like,
Yes.
is it? I mean, it's just rice, right? I mean, like, it's like, but it's more expensive. The other thing I was thinking of was, if you go to one of these supermarkets, there are like these now, healthy snacks, which are like rice-based crisps and whatever, but they're papad. Like, if you open that packet
Yeah.
and you see it, it's actually papad. My mom makes it in summers and sends it to me, and I make it at home. They're now selling it for like $100 in packets, like 2 papad or something. It's ridiculous.
And it's
Yeah, we used to eat
packaging, it's
ragi.
branding.
It's packaging, it's
words.
branding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I noticed something funny the other day. I was in food hall in Delhi, and they were selling macadamia nuts as a superfood. And macadamia nuts are indigenous to Australia. And I was thinking, we don't really they're not really marketed as a superfood in Australia. And that's because one of the elements of a superfood is it's got to be exotic. And that might mean that it comes from another country, or it might mean it's kind of something like millet that's kind of been left into, in small communities where it's grown without chemicals or pesticides and, all that sort of stuff. So it has to have this kind of exotic element around it. But again, if you look, macadamia nuts have a lot of nice oil in them, but so do most nuts, so do peanuts. If you look at the nutrition breakdown, you're not going to call peanuts necessarily a superfood yet because they're so common. Even cashews. See, in Australia, we'd be likely to call a cashew a superfood because we don't grow them; they're exotic. So that element. The other problem with superfoods, there's a fantastic article there's a magazine called Gastronomica, and it's a food journal. People do good research, and it had the 6 kind of attributes of superfoods. And largely what they're about is they're very tied to this whole individualism around health, that, my health's all about what I consume. And there's no kind of thought about that, actually your health has a lot to do with a whole lot of other stuff, where you're born, who you're born to, the resources you have, there's all this stuff going on. Are you somewhere where you can exercise? Can you afford to go to a gym? Are there, all that stuff actually comes into your health, your genetics. Your genetics have a huge role in health. But there's those superfoods. I mean, it's very American. In fact, it's a term that comes out of marketing in America. It's all about it's your fault. If you're sick, it's this kind of moralizing around food. If you're sick, it's your fault. You're not eating the right food. You're not eating
Got
superfoods.
it.
You're not eating, that's it's sort of nobody says that, but the implication is you can do better. Your
Yeah.
diet isn't right. And
We,
then
we
because
it's interesting how we started this whole conversation with a guilt factor about ghar ka khana, bahar ka khana, and now we are
Yeah.
here about guilt factor about not eating the right superfoods. It's like it comes full circle there.
So yeah, and yeah. So anyway, that's my. It's one thing I've got to. I've got some strong ideas about the food apps,
Yeah.
but I'm open to hearing both sides. But with this superfood stuff, I just see a whole lot of other systemic stuff going on.
Fair enough.
It's like this stuff about agriculture, and if we move to like more organic growing and stuff, genuine organic growing, that apparently where it's going to be, it's harder to produce food, like it's probably better food, but you're potentially producing less. And so then you get a kind of scarcity thing happening, which wealthy people can afford to buy the good food, but what's going to happen to other people that end up not eating such potentially good food?
Right.
So there's a whole lot of systemic stuff around that.
I recommend people to buy your book. I also want to read your book. I have it and I will read it as well. But Karan, any final questions that you have? Any thoughts?
Yeah, sorry, just give me a second. Yeah, I need to charge my laptop. It's if you
Yeah,
can
yeah,
just let me. I'm literally running on fumes right now. I can
yeah,
see.
it's okay. Do that and come back. Yeah.
Oh, this is the one. Oh, okay. It's not charging. See, I think it's gonna go off any second. Yeah, we're good. Yeah, thank you. Hi, I'm back.
Haha.
Sorry, I think there's a
And I just one thing while just waiting, the things that I'm saying, they're not unique to me. Like I've quoted a lot of Indian nutritionists, all sorts of people that are also kind of saying these same things. They're also raising these same concerns. So it's not just me blathering on about my pet beefs.
No, fair enough. I'm pretty sure. So, I mean, you are a researcher, so you are all obviously like quoting other researchers as well, and whatever
Yeah.
you.
And I interviewed a lot of people as well. So
Yeah. Okay, Karan. Any questions? Any last comments that you have? That
Yeah,
will
actually,
wrap this.
I really appreciate Charmaine letting us know, because for a lot of us, especially say if I give my own example, my limited knowledge of food and food sources and how do I distinguish, say, good quality from maybe something that's little suspect. It I depend on the label. If I'm standing in, say, at a food hall or something, and I don't have the time to go through Google and to look at all the different sort of macros and all, where it's coming from, and even where this particular sort of, say, quinoa, for lack of better example, right? I don't know where it's being sourced from. I don't even know if it's sourced ethically, sustainably, organically, and all of that. So I depend on the label to sort of kind of hold my hand through this process. um I think where we started with this, with even in the Bonvita sort of example, right? Like, parents just want to make sure that the kid gets something quickly and as fast as possible, and something as healthy as possible. So I think that's also where it kind of ties it down. Obviously, we've all I've been drinking Bonvita, and uh, for me it was more like my parents giving me Bonvita so that I could have milk. So
Oh yes.
the Bonvita went in milk in a way to make it more palatable for kids. Now, of course, now that we know that Bonvita has almost 70%, if I'm not mistaken, 70% sugar was what they said. Out of, say, I think about a spoonful would be about 12 to 14 to maybe 15 grams of sugar. And then 70% of that would be roughly around 7-8 grams of sugar, which is still which is like a lot, right? When you think
It's
about it.
sugar, basically. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's sugar.
it's
Yeah.
sugar. And then Sorry.
No, and then the other thing, sorry, Karan, that I thought I think people didn't know was that milk itself. There are like a ton of lactose intolerant people in
Yeah,
India, so
Yeah.
making
there's a
milk
lot.
palatable is also, I would say, it's a scam. Like, I mean, I
Yeah.
like the whole, you drink milk and your bones will become stronger, etc. The whole campaign that was run by the government to sell more milk also happened in America, happened in India. Then on top of it is this Bonvita thing where, oh, if you don't like milk, then have Bonvita, it will make it more palatable. The whole cycle of it was also like very dangerous, I would say.
Yeah.
Shamin, you were saying something, sorry.
I know, well, of course, it's questioning that milk's good for you. So there's that question.
Yeah.
But also, I think when you're talking about like having, Karan, Bournvita as a kid, probably if you had a glass of Bournvita with a couple of spoons of it in every day, even one glass, it's probably no big deal, right?
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
in a kind of world where people do want to, they want to get their kids something they think is nutritious and they need to do it quickly, if you're having a whole lot of other processed food, I think that's the problem. So, for example, when I was growing up, maybe we had a thing called Milo, which is similar. Maybe I'd
Yeah,
have a
same.
glass of Milo every day, but everything else I ate was made at home. There wasn't a lot of processed food. So I don't
Yeah.
think something like that is bad in of itself, as
Yeah.
as a treat. But it's that all this other processed food that that has a whole lot of stuff hidden in it. And it was interesting what you said about how do I know what's good? How do I know what's quality? And you say I don't really have time to investigate, so I rely on the labels. Well, first of all, the labels will tell you what you want to hear. But I was thinking about if you were buying your fruit and vegetables, like fresh fruit and vegetables, it's pretty easy to know what it is and whether it's good or not, because it'll look at it'll won't look good, or it won't feel right, or it won't smell right. It's so much easier when you're using kind of sort of fresh food like that you don't have to worry about. I mean, I suppose you could then worry about whether it's been sprayed. I mean, in saying that, you could be worried about whether it's sprayed with anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just for my sort of final comment, because I expect we're finishing. The other thing is about all, I think it's really important to be aware of what you eat and cook most of your food at home, and then don't worry too much about it, right? Like, we're getting all so hung up about it. Like, enjoy your food, eat well, cook nicely, go out and have dinner, get a food delivery if you want. But, just be a bit more aware about the reality of any processed food, whether it calls itself a superfood or a Bournvita, and just kind of, I suppose, be aware of what's in it and how much of it you're having. And my recommendation is just learn to cook. Easy to make a few quick things, and just enjoy it. Enjoy the beauty, enjoy the amazing, not just the amazing diverse food, India's kind of traditional diverse food culture, but the fact that you can have anything you want here now, anything. When I first started coming to India, I used to be able to bring lots of food gifts for people, because you couldn't get good chocolate, and now I can hardly bring anything. It's like, you can already get that. No point in bringing chocolate. There's so much of it here, so it's great. There's so much to enjoy, but just that kind of being a bit mindful about not just being a bit cynical about marketing around food.
Understood. Thank you so much, Charmaine, for this wonderful wonderful time exploring food in India and just how food habits are changing. I recommend people buy her book. It's called Eating the Present, Tasting the Future. Charmaine also wants you to buy her book. Please, we will leave a link below to her book as well, so if you are interested, please do go buy it. As I said, this was a very different episode of Explain Like I'm 10. We are trying to do more of these sort of how-to series sort of a thing, because we did one on how to run a restaurant, and I feel like this is also a continuation of that, which is what is India eating. So if you are interested, you can go listen to that episode as well. And please do continue listening to Explain Like I'm 10. Thank you, Karan, for being here. Thank you, and I hope you had fun.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. I had
Yeah.
a good
Thank you.
time. Thanks,
Yeah.
Charmaine. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me on the show.